I can't even see them.
I thought I saw them before, but...
I'm trying to see them. They vanished.
They came from many miles away. Some people had waited hours for their arrival. Others had waited years. Only the oldest could still remember seeing canoes like these in Washington waters.
Welcome to Sequoia.
Thank you all for meeting us here.
The return of hand-carved canoes in this state's centennial year is just the most visible symbol of a Native American renaissance in the Pacific Northwest.
I'm proud to be an Indian living on the reservation.
It's not easy to live in two different worlds, but that's what we end up doing.
Washington is home to several dozen Indian tribes. The state owes much to its first inhabitants, everything from place names to modern highway routes. Once proud, self-sufficient people, Washington Indians have endured pain and poverty and watched as their old ways of life were all but destroyed. Now they are determined to recover their heritage. This is the story of a people who have come full circle. At home on the Colville Indian Reservation, Anita Dupree is making pies, enough for 300 people. The expected turnout at a party honoring Anita's grandmother, Isabel Arcesa, who has just turned 99.
Are you going to wash dishes?
Volunteer helpers prepare food and a village longhouse for the festivities. Soon, the guest of honor arrives.
We hope that she's going to make that 100, 110, 113.
Isabel Arcasa's memories are part of the wealth of this community. Now, her friends and family share in a celebration of ties that have bound them together for longer than even she can remember.
Here's one of my dear friends. Oh, get down to this.
Isabel and the state of Washington both celebrate their centennials this year, but the story of Isabel's people, Washington's native people, stretches thousands of years into the misty past.
Every part of this soil is sacred in the estimation of my people. Every hillside, every valley, every plain, and every grove has been hallowed by some sad or happy event in days long vanished.
Evidence of Washington's first inhabitants includes remnants of villages more than 10,000 years old. When the first Europeans arrived on these shores, they found densely populated native settlements with deep spiritual traditions, richly developed arts, a complex system of trade and commerce, and abundant sources of food. Most prized of all foods was salmon. Prized of all foods was salmon. Each year, when the first salmon left salt water to spawn, native peoples in the Pacific Northwest honored the fish and praised their creator.
When they catch that first salmon, the tribes believe if that first salmon is treated real well, he'll go back and he'll bring the rest of his, the salmon people, and they'll bring them back to the Indian people to harvest.
This first salmon ceremony is a revival of ancient tradition.
Hey, I know you're going to have good luck.
Very important visitor coming to the beach now. Big Chief King Salmon.
A canoe brings the first salmon to the beach. Reverently, he is carried on a stretcher lined with cedar boughs back to the longhouse. After a ceremonial meal, his skeleton is returned to the water. Long ago, the salmon came here in numbers so great, it was said you could walk across the rivers on their backs. When the first non-Indians entered eastern Washington, native people showed them how to gather nutritious roots and berries and store them through the winter.
We went on a trail called Eel Trail. It used to take us most of the day.
These Yakima women still gather roots as their ancestors did.
Right, now you're ready to dig, huh? Yeah. Okay. I haven't got the strength to...
Like salmon fishing, gathering must wait until the first roots have been blessed and the Creator has been thanked.
You do not go out and harvest on Sabbath day, you know, dig or pick or whatever on Sunday.
When Virginia Harrison and Mary Jones were girls, they came here on foot or on horseback. Their elders taught them to leave corn, jewelry, or buckskin as gifts for the earth.
We respect the Mother Earth, so we do these things. And I believe that because we went through this ritual at the top, that was why we were given all these roots.
Linda Harrison has a master's degree in education and strong ties to the modern world. But like many younger Native Americans, she is rediscovering a way of life that once seemed doomed to disappear.
We need to hang on to our elders and learn from them as much as we can because they're not going to be here forever. And so it's important for me to respect them and follow their teachings and to learn from that. Because one day or someday, I may be in their shoes.
We're going to try this tree. Cedar, in our oral tradition, is one of our first ancestors. Quelo, we call it. Say that word. Quelo. That means cedar bark. Come over here.
Bruce Miller used to be a Broadway actor, but a few years ago he returned from New York to help his tribe, the Skokomish, recover its cultural heritage.
Who's next? We can take up to 1/3 of her bark and she'll survive and recover.
For Western Washington tribes, the cedar was the greatest of the Creator's gifts. From it, they made their clothing, dwellings, canoes, baskets, and tools.
We were diapered in pounded cedar bark diapers, and we were laid to rest in cedar canoes. What we're going to do now is prepare our quelo for storage. If we do it just right, hopefully it'll go all the way down to the end.
Bruce Miller learned how to use cedar from tribal elders. The children watch closely as he teaches them to strip the outer bark from the inner and make rope from the bark.
And this rope will be strong enough to tow the van we rode up here in, because we've done it before. Even if they just get to sit and hold the bark, everyone has contributed their share to the work we did today. And when your elders are gone, you're going to be the big trees who are going to be telling the little trees.
Ken Cooper used to be a logger, but thanks to his elders, he knows more about the woods than how to cut trees.
Anytime those old people said anything, we listened. The old people said if you were meant to speak more than you were to listen, you'd have had more than one mouth instead of 2 ears and one mouth.
Here, in lush rainforest, they explained how every plant had its uses.
Grandparents show us how to live with Mother Nature and how to take only what you need from Mother Nature. The roots of this plant here, we boil it and make a tea, which is also a blood purifier. This one over here is a salmonberry, and when they're in this stage here, we eat them. We eat the sprouts. You pull that out, and you get the root of the skunk cabbage. It's used as a Novocaine. We use it for, like, we got a bad toothache. Almost everything, anything that I'm standing on or around, has medicine in it that we use.
From coastal forests to mountains, valleys, and dry plateaus, Indian people shared in the bounties of nature. Self-sufficient, proud, and deeply grateful for all the Creator had given them. And so things remained through countless millennia. Then, 2 centuries ago, everything changed. The Europeans came by sea and by land, first explorers, then traders, missionaries, soldiers, and settlers. The Indians welcomed them, traded with them, and were killed by them. Smallpox, measles, and other diseases brought by the whites left Indian lodges empty, as 90% of the native population was wiped out.
100 years ago, you won and we lost.
In 1854, eager to secure land for settlers, Territorial Governor Isaac Stevens signed treaties with dozens of tribes. The Indians, who owned all the land, relinquished much of it, promises of money, reservations, and rights to hunt and fish at all their usual grounds, for as long as the rivers run.
Under the treaty, we were assured an education. We've certainly gotten an education.
Indian children were taken from their homes and sent to distant boarding schools, where the goal was assimilation, and the motto was kill the Indian, but save the man.
The whole concept of being Indian was attacked. We were just lower than low.
They wanted us to forget that we were Indians. They didn't want us to talk Indian. When we did get to talk Indian, they'd punish us. They wanted us to work in the laundry, the boys to be mechanics or shoemakers. They didn't encourage us to be teachers or doctors or anything like that. We were at the lunch bucket level, I guess you'd call it.
Native religions were forbidden.
It was compulsory to go to church. You had your choice, Catholic or Protestant. So one week I'd go to the Protestant church, next week I'd go to the Catholic church. But I never did understand.
Meanwhile, even as their children were removed, the land the Indians had retained title to under the treaties was also being taken. Congress divided reservations into family-sized plots and gave title to individual Indians. But for the Indians, private ownership of land was an alien concept. Often, they were persuaded to sell their land for a tiny fraction of its real value. Sometimes alcohol was used to cheat Indians out of land, a practice long employed by traders seeking unfair advantage. In other cases, land was simply confiscated by the state. When white homesteaders illegally settled on the Colville Reservation, Congress made the Indians, not the settlers, move. But nothing symbolized more strongly the decline of the Northwest Indian way of life than the end of the great salmon runs. The Indians and their salmon were losers in the name of progress.
Well, the world has 7 wonders that travelers always tell.
Giant dams brought irrigation and electricity to the rural Northwest.
Now the greatest wonder in Uncle Sam's fair land is the King Columbia River and the Big Grand Coulee Dam.
But for the Indians, the dams proved disastrous, as traditional fishing sites and ancient burial grounds were destroyed.
It hit a lot more than just the land. It hit on an Indian way of life. And they never did try to understand what we meant.
Over the years, the decimation of Indian people continued. Unemployment, poverty, alcoholism, suicide. By the 1950s, Chief Seattle's prophecy that one day Indians would be only a memory in the white man's cities seemed to be coming true. Then came the war that turned the tide.
Sometimes at night I'd wake up and there would be game wardens all over the landing here. They would be chasing my dad around.
Allison Gottfriedson grew up on her grandfather's land, a place near Olympia known as Frank's Landing. As they had for generations, her family fished the Nisqually River on and off the reservation, a right guaranteed by treaty.
I didn't know why my dad was being beat up. I remember being afraid a lot, but I didn't know what was going on, really.
In those days, wardens of the Washington Fish and Game Department often arrested Indians and seized their boats for violating state fishing laws. By the 1960s, most of Allison's relatives and friends had been to jail for fishing, but imprisonment didn't stop them.
The fish was our way of life. The fish was our culture. And if we wanted our children to carry on as Native Americans, we didn't have anything to lose.
Inspired by the civil rights movement, they began organizing protests. Sympathizers joined them for marches and fishings. Tension mounted as the state sent armed patrols to stop the demonstrations.
There was probably 500-600 riot police there at the time. I didn't think any of us were going to make it out of that because there was gunfire.
Wells sold his salmon to fish buyers. He doesn't worry about being arrested. In 1974, after more than a decade of conflict between Indians and state game officials, Judge George Bolt, a conservative Republican, issued a momentous legal order. Bolt determined that it was Indians who gave white settlers the right to fish beside them, not the other way around. It was the right of the tribes, not the state, to regulate their own fishermen. Moreover, Bolt ruled the treaties guaranteed Indians 50% of the Washington fishing harvest.
At the time of the Bolt decision, non-Indians were catching between 95 and 97% of the fish.
Claiming that Indians would overfish, non-Indian fishermen and state officials predicted the ruin of the fishing industry.
People said not only no, but hell no. We are not going to live with this. Those are our fish.
But the Supreme Court upheld the Bolt decision. For the Indians, the ruling meant more than legal recognition of their fishing rights.
The decision gave political power to the Indian people, and it gave a recognition of their sovereign right as governments.
The disaster predicted by both non-Indian fishermen and state officials hasn't happened. Tribal officials enforce tight regulations designed to protect fish runs.
Native Americans, historically, they only took what they needed, and they understood that you had to leave a lot in order to have a lot later.
They're giving their life for a good cause.
Here on the Nisqually Reservation, tribal fisheries officers improve their stocks through scientific management. Indian dollars pay for biologists, enforcement officers, and technicians.
We're a little short on males.
Indian hatcheries may soon produce half the state's salmon.
Oh, look at this guy going over.
I want to take him home. Definitely a male Nisqually chum here.
Bob's the expert at mending because he's done this up in Alaska 20 years or so.
On the Swinomish Reservation, Bob Joe and Chester Caillou are repairing their salmon nets.
In the same boat for a couple of years.
We're
Same
partners.
Boat. Yep, wherever the mischievous people are, we're the ones there. Getting in trouble.
Today, where salmon are concerned, fences as well as nets are being mended.
One thing that we have in common between the Indian and the non-Indian was the resource. And if we don't put it together, it'll never be put together.
Now, there are two guardians for Washington's fish, the state and the tribes. They settle most differences out of court as partners in preserving the resource. The system is called cooperative management, and it seems to be working.
The resource is being managed better than well by both of us. I can honestly say that since cooperative management, the actual status of the stocks is much better.
Industry, and the state, the tribes, and the environmentalists, all the parties committed to making it work.
Now we're going to go into the procedures of blessing the fishermen.
Indians now catch more than 40% of Washington's salmon. The revival of the Indian salmon industry has been an economic shot in the arm for many tribes.
Bless our loved ones that go out into these waters to earn their living.
But fishing is still a seasonal occupation, and Indian leaders are making plans for diversified year-round economic activity. As sovereign governments, many tribal councils offer favorable leases to businesses, like this fish processing company, encouraging them to locate on reservations.
Bingo!
Bingo 74. Chicken bingos, each player receives $75.
Some tribes also exercise sovereignty by operating bingo halls for economic benefit. This one employs more than 50 tribal members, including operations manager Jim Grossglass, who once depended on seasonal employment.
2534.
His new job means a steady income and family security.
Sissy, they want to wear the sweatshirt.
Jim and his wife Liddy have 6 children. The oldest boys plan to attend college soon. The kids go to school off the reservation in the town of Laconner. Zachary Grossglass and his twin brother Zebediah are first graders.
Do we have any animals under walks on 2 legs?
They are among the many Swinomish children who will graduate from high school in the year 2000. By that time, the Swinomish hope to offer on-reservation employment to all tribal members who desire it.
We are one tribe that will always be trying to work towards self-sufficiency on this reservation. We're trying to get our people educated enough to where they'll move off the reservation and find jobs and come back at a later years and work for the tribe.
Reservation bingo means more than jobs.
Good morning, Swinomish Health Clinic.
Bingo dollars allow the tribe to continue and expand social services, like this health clinic, despite a decade of federal budget cuts.
Hands down. Good girl. 36.5 inches tall today.
Tourism also offers economic promise. Laconner, a tourist town right across a channel from the Swinomish Reservation, fills up with sightseers on summer afternoons. By contrast, few visit the reservation, but tribal leaders want to change that. On a summer day, Swinomish Tribal Chairman Bob Joe checks up on the reservation's Longhouse restaurant. The tribe leases the building to a private businessman.
Oh, the food is fantastic. I'm from overseas. I'm from Brooklyn, New York.
The development price tag right now is at $25 million.
Small businesses, bingo, tourism. The Swinomish believe these efforts at economic diversification will soon pay handsome dividends.
The major environmental impacts is...
Other tribes have similar stories. The Colville Reservation covers 1 million acres, much of it thickly timbered. Mining and logging rights licensed to non-Indians have long provided some tribal revenues, but little steady Indian employment. Recently, the Colvilles decided to change things.
Colville Indian Precision Pine represents a long-term dream for the Colville people. It's a chance for tribal people to have economic emancipation.
Built just 3 years ago, the mill is a state-of-the-art facility utilizing computer technology and employing 150 people, 3/4 of whom are tribal members.
What we like to think we're doing here is we're producing the first generation of Colville lumbermen, the role models to the next generation.
Dan Brudewald is a role model himself. He left a high-paying job off the reservation to help run this mill.
And I've always been an advocate of Indian enterprise. To come home and to be able to work with the people that I culturally identify with is a real opportunity and has great meaning for me.
Last year, the mill increased its output to 60 million board feet and its payroll to nearly $4 million. It's become a source of jobs and pride.
This enterprise, the dream of the Colville people, I think should be a model for all reservations who want to be self-determining and have the economic power that the mainstream society has.
Timber is a limited resource, and the Colvilles don't want to over-harvest theirs. Like many tribes, they see tourism as another key to a diversified economy. Ironically, their main attraction is the lake formed when Grand Coulee Dam destroyed ancient fishing grounds.
She looks really neat.
health concerns still.
Yeah. Oh, there she goes.
There she goes.
3 years ago, the Colvilles bought 10 houseboats and a marina to launch their tourist venture.
When we first started, even within our own organization, there was a lot of skeptics and kind of probably a lot of behind the door laughing at us.
But the joke was on the doubters. Within months, the $1 million risk was beginning to pay off.
By early 1988, our bookings for July and August were 100%.
And just throttle it in, and that way your boat will go straight.
The houseboats have improved both employment opportunities for the Colvilles and the business climate in nearby communities.
The more boats we get, the more people that will work.
Now the tribe has 30 houseboats. The Colvilles are developing a new marina, an RV park, restaurants, and a retail complex. Rocky Saylor is a dock superintendent at the marina.
Before this job, I was on the reservation logging. It's something different. I never expected it to be like this, but it's fun. Just having the ability to see people have a good time on their vacation. Long-term goals, I'd just like to learn how to operate a marina. I mean, I'm just starting out, so maybe in the next 10 years I can be operating one by myself.
If the Colville Houseboat project continues to grow, there should be several more tribally owned marinas for him to manage.
Teacher, you still have your marker?
We know that these children are going to be the future managers of the resources, fisheries, timber, and so we're trying to give these students a grounding so they'll really be able to assume those responsibilities.
So they're walking in the woods and they come upon a house. And he's banging on the door. What happened?
He tripped and fell.
This is Wahilut School, one of several new Indian schools in Washington.
Oh my gosh, top everything off. We have ghosts in the house.
Wahilut, named for a famous warrior, was founded by fishing rights activists who felt their children were discriminated against in public schools.
We tried to start an Indian club. They wouldn't allow us to have an Indian club. We tried to wear headbands around our head, clothing that was appropriate for Native Americans. We wore our hair braided, furs in our hair. We were kicked out of school for that.
Students, why are they here? You should prove by attendance square.
In contrast to old Indian boarding schools, Wahilut students are encouraged to set high standards for themselves.
And we expect them to be hard workers. We tell them Indian people have never been lazy. We've never been stupid. We've always been hardworking. We've always been inventors. Education should prepare our children to live in their world, their Indian world, with respect for their own culture and knowledge about themselves.
Who's capital Spain?
But as well, we want them to be computer literate, to move into a world of technology and be comfortable there. The children know this is a special, magical place where they are loved and where their futures are important.
Here we're like one big family. In other schools we weren't.
It's gonna be hard when we leave because it is like a family here.
One day, Eagle was soaring high in the sky.
Despite much recent progress, Washington Indians still face many serious problems.
He could hear a strange sound. It was the sound of a little girl crying.
Bruce Miller and Pam James use traditional storytelling to help Indian children cope with family alcoholism.
Little girl, why are you crying?
Oh, my mother has been gone a lot lately, and she's drinking.
Our old legends entailed all of the problems that faced us as people. Now we have different trials and tribulations. We have alcohol and we have drugs. They decimate our people.
I don't think she loves me anymore.
Children come to the classroom despondent when their parents drink, they're left home alone. And in our tradition, Songs and music are part of healing. The eagle begin to dance in time with the drum. And he sings, ya, 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 me, ya.
Bruce Miller believes that children who find pride in their Indian identity will be less susceptible to substance abuse.
In all ethnic communities where the culture is strong, you find the healthiest people, where they still practice their traditional celebrations, their language, their way of life, their traditional stories, as well as being contemporary Americans.
These teenagers from the Suquamish Canoe Club just lost this race, but they feel like winners. Suquamish kids learn about canoes from the inside out.
So it's as important in carving as anything else is to listen. Okay, you listen to your teacher, you listen to the wood. Okay?
Carver, Joe Waterhouse, teaches in the Indian tradition.
The shaft in your paddle should be as long as your arm. When you make a paddle for yourself, you put the wood up there, and that's how long the handle should be. Okay? Now, whoever's going to use this paddle is only about a foot and a half tall.
The kids learn more than how to make canoe paddles.
Part of learning is sharing what you know. Because if we don't share these things, nobody will know. And when nobody knows anymore, well, then that's the end of everything for us.
Waterhouse grew up around the world, the son of a military man, but his father's heart never left home.
Don't push the knife. Everywhere we lived as a child, he kept saying, you must always remember, you know, that your plallam first. I was real young. He showed me canoes and kept telling me one of his dreams was to be able to see canoes back on the water one day. So, you know, for me, I mean, it held real close to my heart, and all of this that I'm doing here is to help my father's vision come true.
His father's dream represents a new challenge for many Suquamish kids.
You know, they go to the school, they get put down because they're different. And as a result, a lot of these kids end up in a lot of trouble. They hit this water, they taste it, they feel it, and all of a sudden they blossom.
Pulling a canoe in the cold waters of Puget Sound is not as easy as it looks.
What I'm trying to do here is give these kids the tools they need to survive. The inner strength combined with the physical strength, plus the ability to think. You got to be able to think pretty quick out there. Their lives depend on being able to get back in that boat. There's a young boy, Roland. He was afraid to get in a canoe when he first came down. I couldn't get him down there for nothing. And then one day he got in the one-man, took off, and we haven't been able to get him out since then. The young woman, Barbara, she's one of the toughest young girls I've ever met. They're not afraid anymore, and they never will be again.
Hey, you want us to study it? Why don't we bring him over here, Joe? We can get it.
Gives them a lot of confidence. Fills a hole that they have in their lives. Helps them learn who they are. We've got a lot of wealth right now. All those children, all our families, that's pretty wealthy stuff.
A century ago, these children would have been stripped of their Indian names. Today, coming full circle means regaining those names and the heritage they embody.
There's some clam fritters that need to go in.
I'm Takshablu, and since 1967, it has been my responsibility to try to preserve everything I can of this culture that I belong to.
Well, you look like you're ready to be a great-grandmother today.
Vi Hilbert, Takshablu, is a respected elder of the Upper Skagit tribe. On this day, 3 of her grandchildren and 2 others will receive Indian names.
No, what is it? No, it's... Can you say it?
We put the name on a young person that deserves to carry it, and then they keep it alive by honoring it.
Names must be taken from one's own family tree, and Vi Hilbert's family has run out of ancestral names to give their children. So what will Vi do?
I have instructed my grandchildren not to have any more children, so they plan to to abide by grandmother's wishes.
Shuckanen. Shuckanen will be the name of this youngster from today on.
Special witnesses have been chosen for each child. They receive gifts and money in appreciation.
To me, I take that very serious when I'm called as a witness to young children being named. When you call somebody to witness the naming of a child, then you're asking that person to keep an eye on that child for the rest of his life, like a godparent.
Teach your children the good way, the Indian way, the contributions that is made by Indian people to the world, to stand tall and proud that they're Indian. We may have been stripped of certain things over the past 500 years. But I'm telling you, as long as there's a drop of Indian blood in you, that which was instilled in us through the generations, in the centuries, is still there.
But one aspect of Native culture might not be here much longer.
Figured out that people were gathered in a great big longhouse. They talked to each other. Skunk came in.
Vi Hilbert taught her native tongue, called Lushootseed, at the University of Washington. She's also written books, which she hopes will keep the language alive.
Young people need to know that they have a beautiful ancestral language that is indeed their heritage. And the words are so much more meaningful when spoken in the language of their ancestors.
Oh, ja, wat zo we hartstikke doen.
These women are among the few remaining Swinomish speakers of their Salish language.
Oh, good late, oh, good. Then I have to put in English after because I don't know how to say the next word. You don't speak it from day to day. You just really forget the different words and what the meaning is.
Recently, many Indians have found new interest in the old tongues. These Colville women meet regularly to study their native language. On larger, more isolated reservations, it's easier to find fluent native speakers. Anita Lewis says she hopes her Yakima language will never be lost.
In my language, prayer to the Great Spirit has more power. There's no cuss words in our language. You can't even say dirty skunk or anything because you're being disrespectful to the skunks.
Come on. If you're still in bed, let's get out of bed.
There's that brown one, too, in the teepee.
Sadly, Indian languages find fewer speakers with each succeeding generation. But as any of these children can tell you, Native arts and celebrations remain alive and well. Powwows like this one attract dancers and drum groups from many tribes.
It's part of the social life of the Indians to go out and gather together at a celebration or a powwow. And it's not only dancing, it's feasting, meeting new people, making friends with them.
Leander George makes and repairs regalia for powwow dancers.
Any style of dancing, it's really expensive. To get a full beaded outfit, it could range anywhere from, $1,500 on up.
This powwow, like many, began where tribes gathered annually to hunt, fish, and trade. For some, the powwow still means romance.
The standard procedure, I think, for bachelors to go around with a roll of blanket under their arm that's advertising that they're available. The young girls, they wear one feather. That means they're single. So the young men feel that they're not out of turn by trying to get acquainted with them. If they're wearing two feathers, then they stay away.
Of course, men can wear all the
They wear
feathers
war
they
bonnet.
want.
See all the feathers in their cap.
For most participants, these dances are serious business. While for others, but whether they're young or old, whether they wear one feather or 100, everyone enjoys a powwow.
Where the Wester lives with the Indian ditties in a traditional way.
Those of you on the south end of Stavish grounds, bring your canoes out on the water.
Coastal tribes throughout the Northwest come to the Lummi Stamish, where dancing and ceremony are also part of the festivities.
Be with them, Lord God. We ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen.
But everyone knows that canoe racing is the main event.
Don't be talking out here because you be John, so you be getting dry.
In the best Northwest tradition, neither rain nor cold can mar the festivities.
Give him a hand, give him a hand. He knows where he wants to go, the canoe will cooperate.
If it is too cold to watch canoe races, there's always the bone game.
You have to clear your mind and concentrate on which side you're going to put it on. And sometimes you can feel the guesser on that side, how he guesses.
In the bone game, players on each team try and guess in which hand their opponent is holding a specially marked bone. Whether they win or lose, these players will tell you it's not just how you play the game, it's how you play the drum.
Almighty Spirit, Great Father, forgive them for not loving Mother Earth, but save her for the children.
Some say what is most fundamental to being Indian is a strong sense of the spiritual and the sacred. Yet Europeans, many of whom came to America seeking religious freedom, refuse to give that same right to Indians.
Our spirituality has always been seen as foreign, something unacceptable, something unchristian.
Here they burned all of our longhouses down and imprisoned people that practiced the religion. If a member of the family died, of a traditional family, they arrested the family until they gave the body a Christian burial.
In 1978, almost 200 years after the Bill of Rights, Congress passed the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. But Lummi tribal member Jewell James still fears for much of what his religion holds sacred.
About 95% of the ancient forests on the west coast have been destroyed. These ancient trees are all being clear-cut, and this clear-cut is having a massive impact on all of us. The tourists that come here looking for the advertised beauty that Washington State brags about, well, it's disappearing real rapidly.
For James, the destruction of the forest is just one sign of disrespect for what the Creator has given us.
We'd like to say it's the big corporations, the large super corporations are the ones that are wasting and doing the strip mining. It's the large timber industries that are clear-cutting the whole mountaintop. But we're the one that's buying cheap. It's in our small everyday habits. We don't realize that when we buy a 54-cent glass cup, coffee cup, that part of the earth has lost something. That gravel that was melted down to make that glass may have come right out of a salmon spawning bed. And when we bust it, we say, well, we'll buy another one for 54 cents. But it would have been a small ceremony to take it and put it away where it'd be safe. But we got this thinking up here where we can just get more quite easy. There's more where that came from. That's part of the problem.
James believes his religion has something to teach everyone.
We don't need to be afraid that we're gonna miss out. Somehow somebody's gonna get our share. And that's the type of thinking that's gonna have to be switched. We have to believe that we just contributed to my brother either next door or 7 generations away by doing that small act. We have to feel good here.
Even the white man is not exempt from the common destiny. We may be brothers and sisters after all.
Daddy, here's another one.
Oh, it's a bunch of cockles in.
Daddy, I found two more.
Go right in the middle. Maybe we'll be tricky and get two.
Perhaps Indians have a special concern for the environment because nature still provides for many of their immediate needs.
You guys want to eat some mussels?
Yeah. Daddy, I want another one off of this one.
For Marlon George and his family, beaches mean food and a healthy supplement to their incomes.
We eat horse clams, gooey ducks, cockles, little necks, butter clams, soft shells, oysters. We eat everything on the beach there is to harvest. My grandmother, my grandpa both dug clams commercially. My dad, my mom both dug commercially. Now I dig commercially.
Since the boat decision brought a surge in the Indian salmon industry, Washington natives have made economic progress. Yet, unemployment on most reservations still averages 50%, and many Indian families subsist on less than $7,000 a year.
It's hard for all the elders. Most all the elders have to go on welfare.
Now, as part of their struggle for economic emancipation, Indians are fighting for rights to harvest shellfish on private beaches, a right they claim is guaranteed by treaty.
And that's very important to our people, to have them recognize the shellfish rights. People shot between us when we're digging. People come down and kick our buckets over and try to make us dump our clams out.
It's getting closer, Stu.
The shellfish issue is one of many that still divide Indian and non-Indian, but today, native concerns are listened to as never before. In the year that Washington officially turned 100, a new era for state and tribal relations began. Just before the historic moment, the Macaws performed their age-old wolf dance. In their oral tradition, before cameras existed, Indians called witnesses to commemorate important occasions. As the first witness, Governor Booth Gardner receives a symbolic gift, $1. Then the governor and leaders of many Washington tribes sign an accord pledging cooperation over the next 100 years and state recognition of the tribes as sovereign governments. The agreement has been called a model for other states.
Historic agreement. The Centennial Accord recognizes that the tribes and the state have a shared future with shared opportunities and shared concerns.
And our tribes are here today to participate in the next 100 years of our future.
And remember always, this is for our children. Our children will grow up in a better society. We're making it happen.
This is the first time in 100 years that we've come together as a nation of Indian people.
It's called the Paddle to Seattle, a centennial event returning a flotilla of Indian canoes to the city named after a great chief.
Something is asleep for a long time, and then it starts waking up, and I think the Indian has been asleep. That's what's coming alive again. Like they say, the circle has began to bloom again.
It's a new ceremony celebrating an old way of life.
This makes my heart glad. I want to cry. I have a cry in my heart, but it ain't a sad cry. It's a good cry to rejoice that I could see the Indian people here again.
Today, Indian voices are many, but the song they are singing is the same as the circle of life becomes whole again. It's a song they hope their children can sing for the next 100 years.